Now, as a hero player, it seems like every other deck, every other like meta deck or rogue deck, they know what to side, they know how to side, and it's just very simple. Some decks can side in the entire 15 cards, some decks. But our deck is a lot different. Our hero decks are a lot more demanding. And what do we do going first or second when it post game one when it comes to siding? Well, I can't tell you exactly what to side because the meta is always changing. However, I can tell you some things fundamentally on how to side.
D time! Neos,
Michael Bowden back again. And I am your host, Destiny Hero Mike. And welcome back. D time! We're here, baby. It's always D time. And even though we're on the Neos tip, it is still always D time in more ways than one. And today, guys, I really want to talk to you guys about side decking. I get so many questions about what do we side, what don't we side, and this is not really a Neos. This is not really a Neos video. This is just a general hero side decking discussion and all the common cards that we play. There's a reason why I have a Stratos here. So this is not just a regular style of side deck discussion. It's not just a regular side deck discussion for just your general meta deck and stuff like that. This is for if you're a hero player, and we upload hero content weekly. We ain't playing no games around here. We've been on a roll, and we've only been on here for 4 months now on YouTube, and we're almost at 2,500 subscribers. That's unheard of! So, round of applause to you guys for supporting this channel. A big shout out to the channel ship members. Now, let's just get straight into it, man. No fluff. The reason why I have Stratos here. Now, the first thing I want you to ask yourself, when you go into a game, whether you went first or second, because everything depends on, there's levels to this. Everything depends on, did you go first? Did you go second? That's the first question. The second question is, what matchup was it? Because before we can get to the first question, if this is from all my competitive experience to you guys. If I went first, and let's say I set up a nasty board, and a strategy is that they can scoop without you knowing what they're playing. That can put you at a disadvantage potentially without you knowing what they play. So before you guys ask me, oh, what do I side in, what do I side out? You have to first understand that. You have to first understand what you're playing against. You don't know what they're playing until they get to play. So if you set up a crazy board, this is more advanced. This is a more advanced strategy that I'm explaining, but I want to get that out of the way first. That if they scoop, because they didn't draw good, or they don't want you to see what they're on, so now you cannot appropriately side against them. And obviously, usually, most of the time, about 80% of the time, they're going to take first. So keep that in mind. The second is, now that you know what they're on, whether you went first or second, there's also, it matters. Because if you went first and you don't know what they're on, well, you have to wait and see what they're on. You can try to blindly side deck, but you have to know what they're on. And if you went second, and they made their turn, you can also do the same. You can also do the same exact thing to them. You can auto scoop if you know you can't play through it, or you don't want them to know what you're playing so that they cannot appropriately side. So that's a real viable strategy. A little risky, but it's a viable strategy. So let's say that you do find out what they're on game one, whether you went first or second. Well, the first question you have to ask yourself, okay, what are they playing? Okay, now that you see what they're playing, you have to think about your side deck. What can I side against this? What hurts this deck? What is the mechanic of this deck? Does it need cards to activate in the graveyard? Does it need cards to resolve? Does it need a chain link of like, for example, a tier limit monster? When it's sent to the graveyard before the second chain link starts, is the primary function graveyard effects? Is the primary function a board full of negates? Is the primary function flunneries with the everybody hates it, the barrier statue? Is the primary function of the deck an Eldritch? Is the primary function of the deck branded? There are so many different things, so many different decks. Is the primary function of the deck Sprite with totally awesome? what was my experience? That's the first thing you have to stop and ask yourself. What was my experience? What is the deck? How does it function? That's the first thing. That's the first step you have to ask yourself. All right. The next thing you have to consider, and it all depends on if you're going first or second. Now, sometimes in some games, not to disrespect my opponent, but we have to balance side decking, because remember, our hero deck is way more different. So we have to balance side decking and consistency. Do we want to take out our deck? Do we want to take out cards out of our deck that is going to help our deck stay consistent? Or do we want to take out, or do we want to keep in cards that can help in certain tight situations? So that's the difficult part. The reason why you see a Stratos here, ask yourself about certain cards. Is this card going first or second? Well, obviously, Stratos is good going first and second. It doesn't matter, first and second. This card has withstood the test of time. This card is always going to be good no matter what turn it is. Always, this card is going to be good. So you have to ask yourself things like that. Another thing about hero decks, there's not a lot of cards. There's not a handful of cards we can just take out and swap out. Because the reason why I say our deck is demanding is because most of the deck requires we have to keep our Rhoda. We have to keep our emergency call. Depending on what build you're playing. If you're playing Neos, we have to keep our polymerization. We can't take our Miracle Fusion. Even though Miracle Fusion sucks to draw, we cannot take that out. There are so many cards that we cannot take out as hero players. We just can't. So that's why I wanted to show you Stratos. We don't side this out. Okay? Next card. A card like Aqua Dolphin. Okay? Now Aqua Dolphin is really strong going first, but it's not going to do a whole lot going second. Now, this is for something like a Neos, okay? This is something like a Neos build. For example, okay, this is basic hero Neos, right? So this card going second is not going to do a whole lot. It really is not going to do a whole lot going second. While, for example, imagine this card being in your hand while your opponent is just going off. This card could have been a Dark Ruler. This card could have been a DD Crow. This card could have been an Ash Blossom. The reason why it's a very unique situation for us is because we do not play a lot of hand traps as it is. There's not that many hand traps we can play if we do decide to play hand traps. That's why we play things like, you might see something like a Super Poly. I've been seeing Dark Ruler as well. But we don't play things like hand traps because it doesn't mesh with our deck. You can't fuse with an Ash Blossom. You can't fuse with a Ghost Ogre. Ghost Ogre can't combo. Joel and Lockbird doesn't combo. Really good card, very powerful card. But there's a whole lot there's more that you cannot do with it than more than you can. So a card like Aqua Dolphin might be a really good card to side out for something like a DD Crow instead when you're going second. Something like that. Because you're not going to get a full combo off when you're going second. You're not going to get, chances are about an 80% chance you're not going to get a Cosmo Neos off when you have to go second. So one of these guys can go out. Something like that. Okay? Next thing. We're talking about a hero card, we're talking about a staple. Here's another one. A general card such as a very powerful card such as Called by the Grave. When we're going second, we're forced to go second during the match. Do we keep it in or side it out? Depends on the deck. If it's something like at the time of recording, Tier Limit, this card is good going first and second because they're going to do stuff on your turn after they're done with they can do things on your turn after they're done with their first turn. Even though they went off, you can't do anything. This card is going to sit in your hand while they just go off. In other matchups, it might not be as effective. You have to sit and watch them do the whole combo against Sprite. It could be good. It stops the Toad. But, you want something like a Dark Ruler. You want something like maybe an evenly match. So, and again, sometimes the opponent might not use a graveyard so heavily while they're just full comboing. For example, Flunderies. This card is terrible against Flunderies when you're going second. Because if they have Dimension Shifter while you're going second, the first thing you do with Dimension Shifter, this is stuck in your hand. nothing you can do. See, it's all matchup specific. There is no one answer on how to side, what to side out. But when you're going first, you keep this in. So when they dimension shifter you, and you're lucky enough to have this in your hand, boom, there it is. Really good. I know you see the mass change right there. We're gonna get to that. So that's something to keep in mind. So okay, I'm going second. I know I'm going second. They don't really use the graveyard that way. Or Exo Sister. They don't use the graveyard at all. Exo Sister. You take that out for something else, some kind of board breaker, or something, twisters, or something like that. So that's something to keep in mind. Another key fundamental card of Hero is Mass Change. Sometimes the Dark Law doesn't cut it, and again, first or second, the first and second factor comes in. Some matchups this is not going to be that crazy. Against Flunderies, this card, it depends. Flunderies, well, we have another option with Flunderies. We have something like a Hero Blast against Flunderies. Hero Blast is really good against Flunderies. Dark Law, not so much against Flunderies. So it really depends. This card is good, better than Dark Law in other matchups too, Hero Blast. Believe it or not, in certain matchups, like for example, Sword Soul, when you're forced to go second, Mass Change is really good because it's going to turn your Stratos, let's say you summon your Stratos, you go to activate your Stratos effect, then they go to Shishao, then you chain your Mass Change, and you dodge the Shishao, and you summon the Blast, and the Blast is going to hit their other monster, and something maybe, excuse me, something maybe more like a Sinister, and it's going to force the Sinister out. But now, can I do the same with a Dark Law? No. Look, they already went first. They went first. They got their graveyard set up. This card sat in your hand, and there's nothing you can't use this card, and it's just sat in your hand. And now they got a Fairy Tale Snow in their graveyard already. They got all kinds of annoying things going on. They got an engine going, and now this renders you kind of, there's not much you can do. However, what this card can be, this card could have been, you want to banish stuff, this card could have been a Crow, for example. This card could have been, gigantic while they're popping off, and this card is in your hand. Could have been a Ghost Ogre, for example. Or if all else fails, could have simply just been a Dark Lord no more. Right? Back row is a problem. And Mass Change might not cut it. Try something like a Twister sometimes. Or evenly match. If it's just another back row heavy deck, evenly match. So things like that, these are things that we commonly play in all of our hero decks. It's safe to say that all hero decks play these cards, minus the Aqua Dolphin. But so just to recap, what deck are we fighting against? Who went first? Who went second? Did my opponent immediately scoop if I went first and got full combo? And if I saw what deck they were playing, what was my experience and how was the deck's function? What was the deck's main mechanic? And lastly, in the middle of a match, stop and think. Even in the middle of a match, just slow down. Already start thinking ahead of time. What cards do I have in my side deck, in my arsenal? This is just not anything to copy, but what cards do I have in my arsenal that will hurt them? And one last thing, red reboot, something like a red reboot, very important. They're about 90% of the time they're going to side, even if they're playing a fusion deck, they're going to side a dimension barrier. They always do it. Put in your red reboot. You have to play the red reboot. So if there's one card I can absolutely tell you what to play the red reboot. And so that's definitely something to consider because they're going to use a blowout trap, whether it's a floodgate such as anti-spell fragrance, or if you're going against the Featherstorm against Flunderies, fun matchup, I know. Red reboot. And I hope this card goes to 2. It's too many blowout trap cards. That's my personal rant and opinion. But yeah, so that's something to consider, guys. Let me know what you guys think in the comment, and let me know some of the things that you're practicing and trying. And I hope this has been a help to you guys. I love you guys, and you guys have yourselves a great weekend.